Good afternoon. My name is Kaya Shivers, and we at Arc Republic are talking to Dr. Kelly Burton, who is a political scientist, serial entrepreneur, change agent, and social critic. She is also the founder of Nexus Research Group, a social impact firm that works with foundations and large scale nonprofits to help them catalyze change in local communities. As well, this is the part I'm very interested about. Dr. Burton has launched in 2017 Founders of Color, a digital platform to helping minority entrepreneurs grow and scale their businesses. Today, Founders of Color has more than 2,700 members, correct? Or around 2,700 members.
Yeah, even we're at 4,000 now. I know that was all. I know. I'm sorry. We need to update so many different facets of our, you know, our branding. But yes, we're close to 4,000 today.
So, yeah, okay, so 4,000, congratulations. And today, what we're going to speak to Dr. Burton about is the recent report that Founders of Color released called Disrupt This: Why Minority Entrepreneurship is Stuck and What Needs to Happen Next. I am all ears.
Yeah.
I am all ears.
Good. Yeah, this is something that we've been working on for a while. It's been a labor of love, and we're just excited to get it out into the world.
Yeah, that's very good. That's very good. I am so excited. This was like very timely. And so I have a couple of questions for
Sure.
you today, just to go over some of the things that I found very interesting and just to know more about Founders of Color. I want you to first kind of give me a quick and dirty explanation or overview of what Founders of Color is,
Sure.
why you started it, and I'm already a member. I don't know if you knew this, but I'm already a member. I signed on, I want to say in 2018, I want to say.
Yeah.
But I signed on early. So
that makes my heart happy.
give us the dirty, okay?
Yeah, sure. So Balance of Color, we founded in 2017. So in June we'll be 2 years old. Our mission is to close the small business growth gap. So on average, white-led firms generate about 10 times the revenue of Black firms and 8 times the revenue of Latino firms. And there's a lot of conversation around the wealth gap, but what we know is that wealth is generated one of two ways: capital W wealth, multi-generational wealth, inheritance or entrepreneurship. And so for many people of color, inheritance is not really an option for us. That means if we're really going to close this wealth gap, we've got to master the mechanics of entrepreneurship. We've got to close the business growth gap so that we can ultimately close the racial wealth gap. So our primary mission is to help minority-owned small businesses to grow. That is it. We're not for everybody, because there are a lot of small businesses that are comfortable being small or lifestyle. They don't want to grow their team. They don't want to manage folks. They don't want to build infrastructure. They don't want to scale. And that's wonderful. But Founders of Color is not for them, because all of our programming is geared around helping minority entrepreneurs to scale and grow.
So I wanted to know, there's a very fraught history about Black entrepreneurship in the United States. And sometimes I want to pull my hair out when I see all of these Instagram posts. What's wrong with Black people? They don't do this. They don't, so you know what I mean? You know what I'm talking about, right?
I do.
And, with that history, there has been kind of like a legacy of build and destroy, build and destroy, build and destroy. I wanted to know, how do you think Founders of Color, like, disrupts that, or can create another narrative in this history that we have with, being disenfranchised intentionally?
Yes. You know what? I feel that there is so much as it relates to business that people of color fundamentally don't understand, right? And there's a lot of institutional knowledge that has been lost in terms of how to build a business, how to grow a business. I think the model was simpler when we were segregated and we were living in segregated communities, and we have these conversations around Auburn Avenue and Black Wall Street. That is never coming back again. But we get stuck there, and we get very nostalgic around these communities and where wealth was first created and generated within African American within African American communities. But I think people of color need to relearn how we build a new business model that is going to help pull us out of the trenches. And we haven't gotten there yet. And I fuss about this all the time. It's Kaya, right? Kaya?
Correct.
You know, I am so tired of Black folks in particular talking about cultural appropriation. Cultural appropriation, cultural appropriation, cultural appropriation. And I'm baffled because I'm like, are we surprised? I mean, is this a conversation around shock? Are we shocked that, you know, Miley Cyrus is tweaking or twerking, or somebody is kind of trying to co-opt the cornrows? I mean, the dominant culture arrived in America 300 years ago, and they productized dirt. You understand what I'm saying? They productized dirt. They went to Native Americans and they said, this dirt right here that your community is sitting on, it belongs to me. Here's this deed that says so. I know you can't read, but this is what it is, and you're going to get off, and I own it now. Introducing ownership to dirt and land, right? And so the fact that 300 years later, we're still baffled that, you know, white folks are finding ways to appropriate our culture and monetize it. It's like, that's been the name of the game. When are we going to figure out how to appropriate these economic models and use them in ways that further our own communities, in ways that are not exploitative, in ways that are not extractive? So we are so stuck in these old, stale, dated, whack conversations that aren't getting us anywhere. We really need to up our game and understand that people of color are operating in a global economy. So while we're talking about circulating the black dollar, well, let me tell you something. The black dollar is less than 1% of GDP. So if you try to circulate that dollar, you circulate less than 1% of GDP, which is fine. It's a good starting point. But hey, if we ain't figured it out by now, and we've been talking about it for the last 60 years, 50 years since integration, we probably need to move on and figure out a new strategy, because there's a global dollar. And if you're able to build a competitive business, you can access that global dollar and you can bring it back to your Black and brown community. So I just think we need to revision and reimagine this conversation around how we build businesses in our community and how we create wealth in our community.
So it sounds like you just getting down with the get down. Let's get with it. All right.
Let's jump on in,
let's jump all in this, right?
Not for small talk.
Okay, exactly, because you know we got work to do, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
so I want to go back to the Disrupt This report. What prompted you to create the report?
Well, you know, a couple of things. I feel that when we at FOC are advancing our mission, out there talking to folks, telling them what we're trying to achieve and accomplish, people will reference certain things and say, oh, well, SBA is doing that. Oh, well, NMSDC is doing that. Oh, well, supply diversity is doing that. Oh, well. So what we wanted to call out and Disrupt This is, yeah, they exist, but they are not really working for the betterment of African Americans and Latinos, right? So, you know, a part of it was establishing this is the current state of affairs if you're a minority entrepreneur, and we focus on entrepreneurship broadly. We think that there's a lot of energy being directed to tech, and that's fine. We've got tech entrepreneurs in our community. It's a good segment of our community, but we also have professional services. We also have construction companies and architecture firms and accounting agencies and the whole kind of continuum of small businesses. And they have needs too, and they need to be supported as well. But we wanted to establish like the current state of affairs, the current lay of the land, and call out all the ways that these interventions are insufficient in moving the needle, right? So we move through it line by line, right? Yeah, there's NMSDC, which is where you got to go to get certified as a minority-owned business, but they certify less than 0.03% of minority-owned businesses, okay? So there are 6 million minority-owned firms. There are 1 million with employees. They certify about 13,000 at a time. Now, you can make the argument that every minority-owned business isn't ready for a B2B opportunity with a Fortune 1000 company. Absolutely. But less than 1% of them, you can't.
Yeah, there's a problem with that number.
There's a problem with that. And when minority firms writ large are accessing less than 1% of spend within these corporations, less than 1%, and we are, you know, greater than 30% of the population, that is a problem. And supplier diversity is not going to fix it. That system needs to be completely dismantled. It's been in place for the last 30 years, and there and a lot of minority firms that have done well under that system, under that regime, but it got to go. It needs to be overhauled, or it needs to be radically reformed. We talk about SBA programs, specifically 8A, which has enabled a lot of small businesses to access billions in contracts. But when they bring on less than 1,000 new certified firms a year, come on now. We've all had conversations. If you're in the small business world around 8A, because you got colleagues that have gone after it, you understand how cumbersome the process is. It works, but it works for a very, very small sliver of the population. And when we're talking about 93% of Black and brown companies have no employees, 93% of minority firms are fundamentally stuck at one stage of small business development, and there's very little going to support them and help lift them up. That's a problem.
So that is a huge problem, right? So, and I really, I appreciate your honesty. You're very transparent in saying that, hey, I'm doing this because I've been down this road before, right? I had a business, I put in my own money, and I still had to shutter it. As well, what I like is that in this conversation, you say we don't have all the answers, but we know that there's a problem. We know that there needs to be some serious fundamental changes that are going on. As an entrepreneur, right? So as somebody with a company, as somebody who has a company, you still work doing research and with founders of color, how can you be an entrepreneur and train and be competitive in order to get those contracts or get multiple employees, and at the same time hold the business landscape accountable? Because there's, in my opinion, in my eyes, maybe I'm crazy.
Yeah.
Right. In my eyes, is one thing, right? It's like having all the, having the structure in place, and making sure that you have people who can do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
But when there isn't something that holds these accountable, you will still be blacked out. You still won't get the resources.
Yes, absolutely. And for us, the way we're trying to solve that is and I encourage people to go to foundersofcolor.org and access the site. It's on our homepage. But we talk about this. Like, for me, my background is social science. And so I've got a PhD in political science. So my brain is wired to think about, okay, how can we replicate this? How can we scale this? How can we document it? How can we apply a systems approach to it? Because what we see is, events, programs. Okay, so how is all of that aggregating up to this broader challenge? So for us, we offer like a point by point. Not only are we calling folks out, this is how we at Founders of Color are seeking to address this issue. And number one is building the base, right? We've got to build the base. Entrepreneurs of color are operating in isolation. We're not connected. We're not synced up. There's very few places that are like destinations for people of color if you're trying to access resources and information and that sort of thing. And that's what we aspire to be at FOC. But we've got to build that base, because when you've got a platform with 50,000 people on it, 100,000, 250,000, a million minority entrepreneurs, that's very, very powerful, right? So you don't have to be the activist to go out to Coca-Cola, who's given you a $2.5 million contract, and wag your finger at Coca-Cola and say, Coca-Cola, you're not doing what you said you do, or you're not doing well enough. That's our function, right? Because we can be the advocate, we can be the activist arm, and you can be plugged in and receiving the services and support in the ways that all sorts of advocacy organizations run. But you don't have to be the one that's going to your client, calling them out on the ways that they're not showing up for people of color. That's the power of building the base. That's the power of collective action. And back in the 60s, we had these organizations, right? We had the SELCs, we had the SNCC, we had the urban leagues, we had the NAACP, and they have served their function. But it's time for a new generation of organizations to come to the fore for them to transfer that mantle, because there's still work for them to do, but it's a new age, a new era. We need new tactics, new strategies that align with the current age.
So I have, diversity is such a dirty word in a lot of ways. right?
It can be for sure.
It could be really dirty, right? But is can there be such a thing as diversity in the business? Let me rephrase that. As a social scientist, the yes or no questions, we got to throw those out, right? You know what? We're gonna get to, in terms of talking about diversity, particularly as a Black woman, I want to zero in on Black women entrepreneurship.
Yes.
And how how do we explain the phenomenon of Black women being just so low on the totem pole
Yes.
of businesses?
Yes. 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 And that is like, you're at my heart space there,
Okay.
Katia. Because families of color is gender agnostic, but the ones who show up for the programming, like for instance, we've got a group coaching program which involves a considerable investment. Each and every member is a Black woman. Okay. They show up for our webinars, they show up at our events because they want the knowledge, they want the information. They are striving, they are ambitious, they are hardworking, they are driven, right? But at the same time, only 3 out of every 100 Black female-owned businesses has employees, right? So if you line up 100 Black female entrepreneurs, 100, only 3 of them will actually have W-2 employees. That's insane, right? And it's not because we're not smart. We're the most highly educated segment of the U.S. population. So it's not that we're not smart, it's not that we're not educated, it's not that we're not hardworking. It's none of that stuff. Oftentimes it's we don't know what we don't know. And here's the big one. What has gotten us here as women of color, Black women in particular, right? Being a perfectionist, always doing it ourselves, being independent to a fault, that stuff that we own, that we're like, I could do it. I don't need to hire you. I'm going to do it myself. That is our Achilles heel.
Woo,
when it comes
will
to
hurt us all the
right?
time.
Yeah, and it'll put us in an early grave, Kaya, to be perfectly frank, and I see it all the time. And it's hard. These are hard lessons to learn, and I'm speaking from experience. I am constantly unlearning lessons and ways of doing and being that have gotten me to this point, 41 years old, at a certain stage in my career, PhD and 2 small businesses and whatever else. But a lot of that stuff that got me here is not going to get me there.
Oh,
and
wait,
I got to let
apply.
go.
Oh, yes.
And I got to set it. And yeah, do we need more access to capital? Absolutely. Do we not know a whole lot about how you scale a business? For sure. But where we need to come together as a community and support one another is this mindset stuff. And unlearning a lot of the stuff that we've had to learn as Black women, holding everybody up, Black men, white women, white men, everybody else.
And they mama and they cousins and them.
They mama and their cousins and they babies, right? I say all the time, my mom, figuratively speaking, our mothers were white men secretaries. Our grandmothers were white women's nannies. You know what I mean? And now we as a generation are just coming into our own and having options and deciding, you know what? But we still got the brothers, our husbands, who require a whole different level of support. Being a Black man in this country, that's a whole, supporting the Black man is in and of itself a very, very different thing. And really, oftentimes, there's no one who's holding us up. It's like we are the end of the road. We holding up everybody else, and nobody's really got our back. The only ones who really has our back are other Black women who get it, right? There's no other demographic that's really showing up for Black women in the ways that we show up everybody else. And that's just the reality. But with that being said, we've got to find new ways of doing, new ways of being, new ways of showing up that don't put us in an early grave and stop our own professional trajectory. Because a lot of times it's the other stuff that we talk about, but in the Black community, we don't create enough space to collectively do our own work.
Right. And so can you tell me, what does that look like? How do we create a space to collectively do our own work? Because there was just a lot of discussion I've been having over the last 2 or 3 months about just kind of pushing back on pathologizing Black people, right? And why we don't have, and why it's our fault, blah, 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 and all this other stuff. And one of the conversations just something I just told somebody. People are like, oh, Black people don't want to live with each other. Black people don't want to support Black businesses. And I said, sometimes it's just simply, we don't even know how,
Right.
to do it. What does that look like? So I'm really interested in you telling me, what does it mean to have this space and this collective work in supporting and buffering these businesses?
Yes. And that's an excellent question. So, we become fast friends, Kaya, at the time that we've been on this call. I'm probably saying way too much, but that's okay. That's just kind of the stage that I'm in. We're trying to figure that out as founders of color. A lot of it is going to require us to figure out how we scale, and we're in the process of raising capital as I speak. Because to have these conversations, you have to have certain economies of scale, right? But I mean, we've all seen the the social media posts where somebody will come up and say, like, there'll be two Black folks beefing, right, about something, and somebody will say, "It's this common thing, that's a family conversation. We always out in public tearing one another down." And it's like, okay, so where's this family reunion? Where are we all like meeting in Montana once a year to hash out this BS that is, right? We got some stuff we need to work out, because as many conversations as I have with white folks about the value of Black and brown businesses, I have as many conversations with Black people about the value and the worthiness and the capability of Black and brown business, right? And then I'll talk to business owners, and they will complain about Black customers, and Black customers complaining about Black businesses, right? So there's something there that we need to work out. And this is what happens when, after 300 plus years, you are told that you are less than. It creates self-limited thinking that is hardwired and ingrained in your DNA. Like, literally, there's studies that have come, the ways that we internalize trauma generationally. So we're swimming in the same toxic, racist pool of messaging and thoughts and imagery that everybody else is swimming in. We're swimming in it too. And there are some decolonization that needs to happen within our collective psyche. How we create those spaces, we're doing our best at FOC, but we need more spaces, because it's one thing to tell everybody else what they should be doing around these issues. It's another thing for us to do our own work, because at the end of the day, I only have power over myself. The extent to which white people get woke, I got but so much control over their wokeness and their consciousness and their self-awareness, and the extent to which they're willing to deal with white privilege. We can prompt and probe that, but my experience is that white folks are the best advocates of that, right? So I say we identify the champions, the white folks who are the champion of that, and allow them to proliferate it within white America, right? And for me, that's too, I don't feel like carrying that burden at this stage of my life. What I can work on is me. What I can work on is me. And I think if we as Black people in particular started to think about the ways that we can work on the we, that would be powerful. I mean, that would be powerful. And it's not about deflecting and blaming the victim and all that. No, it's not about that. It's because a lot of this is a reflection of me doing my own personal work, having my own life coach, going through my own self-care process, debugging my own mindset, and realizing a lot of that stuff is not just individual, it's collective. And it's out of my personal experience of being a Black woman. And so I know other Black women, and I see the other ways that it manifests, which gives me indications that it's a broader, more collective problem. Other folks got their stuff that they need to figure out and heal from, and we got our stuff that we need to figure out and heal from.
Sis, I am a believer. I think this is one of many, many conversations that we will have. I wanted to give the Arc Republic Collective and family an introduction to you. You are fire. You are brilliant. You are a supernova.
Tell them don't be coming for me in them comments now. They be like, what?
Let me tell you.
I am excited about being able to have new, fresh conversations. Like you mentioned, we don't have all the answers. I got my perspective like everybody else. And as the person leading FOC, there's a lot of that like bleeds over into FOC and our culture, what we're all about. But I don't have all the answers. I just want to create the space to have new conversations. I think there's a lot of power in that because here's the reality: we're stuck, and what we're currently doing ain't really working for us. It's just not, and we've got to take the power back.
Yeah, I have so much I want to say. You've made me think about a whole bunch of things, as a business owner, right? And working at the same time. And many a night sitting here and thinking to myself, I cannot do this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
This is like literally going to kill me if I keep burning both ends of the stick. I am open, I am down, I am a member. And I want you to tell the folks out listening, how can they be a part of either Founders of Color or what we need to do to continue to move this forward and actually do real work beyond the dialogue. I love talking, but I need shit. Excuse me. Oops.
I'm with you. Yes, I love a good conversation too, but at the end of the day, I'm trying to get it done. Like, how can we execute? I mean, it's our generation's work to do. Like, what is our cause? It's not the folks who are around doing social civil rights. They did their work. They did the heavy lifting. Like, what's our work to do?
Yeah.
We really need to figure that out. And we need to get information. So I agree with you. It's a lot that we're doing that is not sustainable for us. Even for me, I'm having this conversation with myself this morning, and that's the reason why we decided to raise capital, because there's a lot of not the burden, but the work of FOC that falls on me, but I realize it's not sustainable. So how do I figure out a new way? There's got to be, we as people of color have to support one another in finding new pathways. So in terms of how folks can connect with us, at www.foundersofcolor.org. Our current signature program is Scale and Grow. It's a group coaching program. And so we launch every quarter. We've got a cohort that is launching in June. So folks will definitely want to check that out. It's for people who are primarily solopreneurs, successful solopreneurs, right? And are trying to figure out how they scale that into an actual business. That's who it's best for. In addition to that, we've got free resources. I definitely encourage that folks check out our How to Build a Sustainable Six-Figure Business webinar. It's one of our most highly well-received webinars to date. It's a good place to start if you're trying to plug in and figure out how FOC can support you. But we're growing and we're launching new programming all the time. So like you said, you've been a member since 2018. I'm sure you've seen us do all sorts of things. We're likewise trying to figure out our business model and how we deliver the most value. So, there's going to be a lot coming at our community over the course of the next year. So we just encourage everybody to stay plugged in.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly Burton. I appreciate you and your insight, and I look forward to hearing more about Founders and Colors and the good work that you're doing.
Awesome. Thanks so much for this, Kaya. Appreciate it. And thanks for being a member of FOC.